Hello Netrunner fans and welcome to my review of Salsette Island. This is the fourth data pack in the Mumbad cycle. In the first part of the video we'll look at the runner cards, part 2 we'll look at all the corp cards. The first card we're looking at is a new event for Anarchs. This is Making an Entrance. It's 0 to play, it's 2 influence, it's priority, which means you can only play it as your first click. Look at the top 6 cards of your stack. You may trash any of those cards and arrange the rest in any order. Here's a very Anarch card filtering effect. This reminds me a lot of Inject. And I think Inject has been good enough to see play on and off in a few decks. This one to me has quite a few advantages over Inject. You're not going to get any credits for it, but it also doesn't cost any to play. The priority thing kind of sucks, but generally if you're looking to play like a card manipulation effect or a card draw effect, it's going to be better to play it earlier in the turn anyway. There's 2 kind of core uses of this card, and I think that realistically, if this is going to beat out some of the competing options, you're going to have to utilize both of these. The first is the ability to assemble some combination of cards quickly. If you need 2 cards in play really early in the game, or maybe you just need one specific card really early in the game, this is going to be a good way to find it. Since you get to reorder the cards, you could put one on top. You could also trash duplicate or other just worthless cards. Now, in Anarch, we have the Wildside Pancake combo. That's another card draw effect, and I could maybe see you playing this as a way to find the pancakes a little quicker. You wouldn't necessarily have to play as many copies of it. So maybe cutting 1 or 2 of those for 1 or 2 of these is an option. Now the other potential use is some sort of recursion effect that's out of the discard pile. So we could be talking about something obvious like Clone Chip, or maybe even something like you could discard a big icebreaker like a Morning Star or something like that, and then use Retrieval Run to get it back. This seems okay to me. I could definitely see it seeing play as maybe a 1 or 2 of. I don't really think you're going to be playing a ton of this unless we see a more combo-oriented Anarch deck, maybe along the lines of the Data Leak reversal decks that were popular at Worlds. The next card is a new resource for Anarchs. This is Salsette Slums. It's 2 to play, it's 2 influence, it's a location, and it's seedy. Once per turn, when you pay the trash cost of an accessed card, remove that card from the game instead of trashing it. I really like this, mainly because I think that removing cards from the game is an aspect of the design space that has really just not been explored enough. I would like to see more of those kind of effects on both sides of the game. And this card's really appearing at a critical moment in the metagame, where we're seeing a lot of mass asset decks, especially out of industrial genomics, and all those mass asset decks rely on Museum of History to recur stuff endlessly. Now this is going to be a way that when you trash their Museum of History, you can deal with it for good. And it's also going to give you the ability to trash something like Shock, which a lot of times the industrial genomics player is going to put in their archives and force you to access over and over as you negate their ID power. With the rise of the genomics deck, we've seen people trying out a lot of different tools to beat it. We've seen Archive Interface pretty commonly. That's such a narrow use card, but it definitely works at getting rid of the shocks and whatnot. I've found that overall, the most effective card is just Employee Strike. That's a card that's going to shut off their ID power, and the big thing about Employee Strike is at whatever stage of the game you draw it, it's going to probably do something useful. The biggest thing that I'm seeing that could be a problem with this Salsette Slums is, especially out of Wizard, it's going to be a lot better if you draw it earlier in the game, because you're going to have a whole series of turns where you're just running and trashing assets. I found that to be a pretty effective line of play against the genomics decks, just trying to keep their pieces all from being in play at once and trying to prevent them from making it too difficult to trash things by running over and over and dealing with their assets. Now, this is going to be really good if you get it at the stage of the game where you're able to remove those cards you're trashing. But if you draw this late game, it's not going to be as good as something like Archive's Interface or especially Employee Strike would be. This does potentially have a few advantages over Employee Strike. It's not going to cost an influence out of Anarch, so that's a good thing. And the other big thing is that it's not going to be susceptible to dying against other currents. In my versions of the Genomics deck, and a lot of them I've seen online, people are playing a couple copies of Cerebral Static, especially against Wizard. That's really effective and really helps shore up kind of your core weakness with the deck. So I think that this Salsette Slums potentially could be a little harder to kill, but this is a resource. So it's going to be vulnerable to tags. It's going to be vulnerable to something like Elizabeth Mills. I will say that this is definitely going to make the top of the list along with Employee Strike, mainly because it does something useful against virtually every deck. Because you're going to get to trash something like Jackson Howard or just really important stuff and remove it from the game. And with the amount of recursion that your average Corp deck plays, I could see this always being useful against basically anything. Next up, we have an event for Criminal. This is Exclusive Party. It's 0 to play, it's 1 influence. Draw 1 card, gain 1 credit for each copy of Exclusive Party in your heap, and it's limit 6 per deck. The first thing I want to point out with this is that the first copy you play doesn't get you any credits. Events go to the heap after their effects are resolved. So in other words, you're going to play this, you'll draw that card, you'll gain 0 credits, and then it'll go to your heap. Now you might be thinking, hey, that's not so bad. It's just I'm clicking to draw a card, and that's the same as the basic rules thing. Well, yeah, but the only problem with that is that this costs deck slots. And I really don't see this being worth playing unless you play all 6 of them. And the reason for that is it's going to take 3 copies before it's even an easy mark. In other words, you're going to have to already have 3 copies in the discard pile when you play this to get your 3 credits. So this just, to me, it seems like it's only going to be good if you have a way to go through your deck enough where you're going to consistently be playing the 4th, 5th, and 6th copies of this card. It's not worth it, really, to play the first 3. And so there's maybe a few ways that we could enable that. The first and the most obvious would just be drawing a ton of cards. Now, Criminal's not especially great at that, but maybe out of like Andy or something like that where you're getting a bunch of front-loaded cards, I could see that being okay. The other thing I thought of is just mill effects. So, if you put this in a max deck, I guess that could be okay if you want to spend 6 influence. Or like maybe something like Rolodex, which if you already had a use for that anyway, maybe in like a stealth deck, you're trying to find the right cards at the right time. This could allow you to mill copies of it, and then you wouldn't actually have to play them. Your subsequent copies would be better because there's already some in your discard. I'm not super wild about this just because it's going to eat up all those deck slots, but as a 0 cost event with a really generic economy effect, it's hard to count this thing out. I think it could potentially see some play maybe in the Andy deck I was describing, or maybe a couple other things where you just need some filler and you're pretty consistently going to draw your entire deck, so you're going to get those juicy 4th, 5th, and 6th copies. Next up, we have a new icebreaker for Criminals. This is Vama Deva. It's a 6 to play 1 MU program. It's 2 influence. It's an icebreaker AI Deva, and it's unique. It starts with 2 strength. It has credit break ice subroutine on a piece of ice with exactly 1 subroutine. Then it has credit plus 1 strength. Has 2 credits, swap Vama Deva with a Deva program from your grip. Here's the second of the Deva programs, and part of me wants to reserve judgment a little bit because we haven't seen the whole cycle. Presumably there's going to at least be an Anarch one as well. I'm not super impressed with this, especially since this is an AI breaker that's not going to break, I would say, half or so of your opposing suite. If you run up against like an ETF deck, this is going to do very, very little against them. This would be way, way stronger if it broke one subroutine, exactly one, and you couldn't use it anymore, because then you could use like E3 or something like that to enable it. But as it is, you can only use it against ice with one subroutine. The game has quite a bit of them, but they tend to be terrible low-end ice. And like if you're going to break something like Toll Booth with this, I think you can probably come up with a better way to do that than paying 6 for a 2-strength icebreaker. We'll have to see what the rest of the Devas do, because as it is now, I'm not particularly impressed with this. Next up, we have another icebreaker, this time for Shapers. This is Brahmin. It's a 4-to-play 2MU program, 3 influence. It's an icebreaker AI, and it starts with 3 strength. It has credit, break up to 2 ice subroutines. Then it has 2 credits plus 1 strength. Whenever an encounter with a piece of ice in which you used Brahmin to break a subroutine ends, add 1 installed non-virus program to the top of your stack. This seems pretty consistent with a lot of other AI breakers, where it's really effective against a narrow subset of ice, but then it has some serious issues. Now, those serious issues are pretty straightforward. First of all, 2MU, that's a big problem. Even in Shaper, where we have the best MU effects in the game, we really would prefer to play something like Astrolabe or just a lower end console and not have to play things like memory chips or just other junk like that in our deck. The other thing with this is it's got this, when you use it, it returns a program to the top of your deck ability. Now that, I think, is a disadvantage, but if you're actually including this card in your deck, you're going to have to make it an advantage. I don't see this being good enough unless you're somehow reaping benefits from that effect. Now, there's a few things that I can come up with that. We've seen a fair amount of people trying things with Haley and Technical Writer. That deck could potentially use this. You'd be able to bounce programs, reinstall them. You're going to get to install that extra program with Haley's ability, and you're going to get the credits from Technical Writer. So that's a way to mitigate some of the lost clicks where you had to draw the program and then reinstall it after you Brahmined. The other thing I can think of is that sometimes with the program you have, you would want to return it and reinstall it. The easy example would be David, or maybe Lady, or something that comes into play with counters that you spend and you want to refresh. Now, it's important to point out here that it says non-virus, so you're not going to be able to use cache or some of the more obvious effects that you would really like to use with this. But you could potentially use it with David. I think David could shore up a lot of the weaknesses of this card, especially high strength things with not a lot of subroutines. So this, I think, maybe could see play as a supplement to an existing Icebreaker suite, but I think it's going to run into a lot of problems that other cards entering the Shaper Icebreaker pool are going to have. It's going to be up against something like Ottman, which is, I think, just an overall better way to do AI breakers. So I think this is really going to depend on there being a deck that can utilize the Brahmin's bouncing programs to the top of your deck thing to an advantage. And I think that's almost necessarily going to include using David, barring some card that hasn't seen print yet. Next up, we have a new resource for Shapers. This is Patron. It's 3 to install, it's 3 influence, it's a resource connection. When your turn begins, you may choose a server. The first time you make a successful run on that server this turn, instead of accessing cards, draw 2 cards. Well, the immediate comparison of this card is to security testing. Security testing was a big staple in Criminal for a long time, especially with the successful run-oriented economy with Desperado and Data Sucker. This card is absolutely nowhere near as good as security testing, holy cow. The big thing is, 3 to install, that sucks. And then you still got to make that successful run before you're even going to get any kind of advantage out of it. And on top of that, it's in Shaper. So if you have 3 credits, you could just play Quality Time and draw 5 cards right away and not even have to make a run. Same thing goes for Diesel. That's only going to get you 3 cards, but you can play it for free and you can just, get the cards immediately. So this, to me, it seems absolutely critical that you're going to get something out of it over and over and over. And we are in a period of the game where there's a lot of horizontal decks, so you could target their remote server and then run that to draw cards. That's certainly going to extend the longevity of this card into the later game. But it seems necessarily the case that you're going to want to stack some other sort of successful run effect. So we're looking at Desperado or Dirty Laundry, Data Sucker, something like that. And I really just don't see you being able to build a great Shaper deck that can do that. There is Da Vinci, which is a card that I was reasonably positive about. I think that maybe if you use Patron and Da Vinci together, you could start to get to the level that you would need to make this card worthwhile. But as it is, this 3 install cost, the fact that it has this delayed drawing of cards, it seems to me like this card just really doesn't fit all that great into any existing deck. If you wanted some recurring draw engine, you could pay 2 more and play Professional Contacts. And if you wanted some better way to realize card draw quickly, you could play Quality Time or Diesel. So I don't know. I don't really like this. I think maybe it could be good enough in the future if there's enough successful run stack effects. But as it is, there's just not really that existing. Next up, we have a neutral piece of hardware. This is Sports Hopper. It's 3 to install, it's 0 influence, it's a vehicle. It gives you +1 link, and then it has trash to draw 3 cards. This is the exact sort of design that I absolutely love. The biggest thing I like is that this thing's link is a tack on. It's not the main ability. If you've ever heard me talk about Link, the main thing I say is that Link is not good enough to be the core effect of a card. And for this thing, obviously the core effect is drawing 3 cards by trashing it. The Link is just a tacked on thing that's going to be nice if you're using some sort of Link effect. So that right there makes me really excited because I think it shows a sort of shifting paradigm that we're having continued from Data and Destiny. The first thing to talk about is that this has a pseudo Plascrete effect in that it would help you survive against double Scorched Earth. If you have a 5-card hand and they play a Scorched Earth, you're going to go down to 1 card. You'd be able to fire this thing during your paid ability window, draw 3 cards, and now you're at 4 cards so you can survive a second Scorched. That's awesome. The problem with Plascrete is that it only works against Scorched Earth. That's all it does. It's a useless draw otherwise. Whereas this thing is always going to do something, and I strongly, strongly prefer that type of design versus these narrow use hosers like Plascrete. Now, the other advantage, of course, is that you're going to be able to draw those 3 cards against a Jinteki deck as well. Something that's trying to kill you with Ronin and maybe Neural EMP, it's going to have a lot harder time if you have the ability to draw cards at a paid ability window. Double Ronin or Ronin plus Neural EMP is not going to be as effective. The other thing I wanted to point out is that this is going to be pretty sweet in Geist. It's going to be a nice way to have a solution to Scorch, like I said, but also going to be a way to draw 4 cards as a burst effect. And I think there's already a few versions of Geist that do some stuff with Link anyway, so I think that that could maybe be useful as well. I really, really like this design. I think this is the easiest example I can possibly come up with of how far the design of this game has progressed since the initial release. If we look at this compared to Plascrete, Plascrete was in the first data pack ever printed, What Lies Ahead, and this is just a multi-use way to deal with Scorched Earth that isn't just this cheesy hoser that basically says counter target Scorched Earth. I think that this is way more interesting, way better design, and I would much rather see stuff like this as solutions to problem cards rather than some card that has a very narrow, very obvious, kind of cheesy stop a certain card effect type use. The last runner card in the pack is also neutral. It's called Bazaar. It's a 1-to-play resource for no influence. It's a location and it's ritzy. Whenever you install a piece of hardware from your grip, you may install another piece of that hardware from your grip, paying all costs. Man, I'm going to have to dig through my box and find my replicators. With Replicator, you're going to be able to tutor up copies, especially of like Spy Camera or Net Chip, the pieces of hardware that you can play more than 3 of. And this is going to be a way that you can install them quickly. Now, if you're playing Haley, you're going to be able to install them even more quickly. That's going to be sweet. And on top of that, you can use Technical Writer as your economy tool. So you're going to be able to install a bunch of hardware, charge up technical writers, make money, and have all these copies of these limit 6 per deck cards in play. I think that's definitely something that I'm going to be playing around with. I don't know if it's going to be good enough. I don't know if we really have enough good hardware to make Replicator happen, but I'm certainly going to put it together, and it's certainly going to be fun. That's going to do it for part 1 of my Salsette Island review. Be sure to tune into part 2 where we're going to look at the corp cards. There's lots of fun stuff over there. And if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you over in part 2.